Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for clicking on this video. This is week one of the bonus content I'm putting out. Basically, it's just going to be me, hopefully short form. I can't guarantee it won't turn into long form, but hopefully this is more short form video of me talking about one, maybe two movies at the most. Just that ones I haven't really touched on. Most of these will be from my top 100 that, I've only found time to talk about in that original video, which you can find on my YouTube channel. So, for the first week, I decided to talk about two movies, a movie and its sequel. I know we did sequels, I did sequels, but this is one I wanted to talk about that I didn't talk about on that list because it wasn't good enough to make that list. And the first one is part of my top 100, and that is the Rocky Horror Picture Show and its sequel, Shock Treatment. So, let's start with Rocky Horror Picture Show. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is a great musical. It is not my favorite musical, that's obviously Little Shop of Horrors, but it's up there. It is one of my favorite musicals. I think it's got some great music, some great acting, especially from Tim Curry. Tim Curry is amazing in this movie. It would be my second favorite Tim Curry movie, next to Clue. But we're talking Rocky Horror Picture Show. So, basically the general idea is you have Brad and Janet Majors. They're a pair of normal, young kids who get engaged, and they decide to go out and tell the person they met in a science lecture class, and they decide to go tell the professor of that lecture, because they're friends with him, that they are engaged. On their way, their tire blows out, they don't have a spare, so they walk to the nearest house, which happens to be a castle that's having a party that night. You meet Riff Raff and Magenta, who are the servants of the house, and then you meet Dr. Frank-N-Furter, the person whose house it is. Frank is a weird transvestite. He's pansexual, according to Tim Curry, and he is working on creating the perfect man, who ends up fitting kind of that Nazi idealism of the blonde-haired, blue eyes, bronzed man. But anyways, Brad and Janet are taken to the lab to see the creation unfold, which is what the party is for. You meet Rocky Horror. It is the creation of Dr. Frank-N-Furter, and you meet the previous love of Dr. Frank-N-Furter, who is Eddie, who he had frozen. He thaws and comes out. He also is in a relationship with Columbia, Dr. Frank-N-Furter's first love, as he kind of tosses people away because, his life is about happiness, fulfillment, and most of that is through sex. So he has a lover. Once he gets bored with them, he moves on, and so on and so forth. He kills Eddie really quick. He's the unfrozen lover. And you find out that Rocky Horror shares half of Eddie's brain, and Eddie has the other half, but Eddie's dead now. Frank then goes to have sex with Rocky Horror, Janet, and then Brad. Rocky Horror escapes and has sex with Janet, because again, this movie's about sex. Great musical, a lot of sex. No nudity, but a lot of sex. Everett Scott shows up as Rocky and Janet are discovered having they have just finished intercourse and they're discovered. You find out Everett Scott is looking for his cousin, who happens to be Eddie, and at the end of it all you find out Frank-N-Furter, Magenta, and Riff Raff are aliens. It's kind of a screwy plot, but it's a great movie. It's got great music. Richard O'Brien, who also plays Riff Raff, did all the music for this movie, and it is a great time. I was introduced to it back in the 90s by my brother. He's the first one to show me Rocky Horror. I fell in love with it. The VHS version that we had at the time also contained footage of the Rocky Horror, people doing the motions to the show, and it had a short documentary on, those midnight showings, because Rocky Horror is currently the longest running theatrical film ever, as it has been shown at least once a weekend since its original release back in, I believe, 1975. 1975 is when this came out. It's been shown at least once a week in the theater. COVID might have affected those numbers, I'm not sure, but even if it did, no movie comes near being ran every freaking week for that long. So it's really cool. I've never gotten to see a stage production of this show or go to a midnight showing of it. I'd love to someday, but it is a great movie. This was, of course, it had a lot of success. It bombed in its initial run, but midnight showings brought up its revenue highly, and so it was decided that it needed a sequel. Tim Curry wasn't really big on coming back to do Frankenfurter, so a lot of ideas were pitched around, and finally they made Shock Treatment. Shock Treatment also suffers because it's supposed to take place in a small American town, and they unfortunately couldn't film in America due to an actor's strike. So they had to film in England, and nothing in England looks like America. So they had to retool the entire script to take it out of a small American town, and they decided to move it into the best thing they had, which was a TV studio. So the entire movie takes place in a TV studio while still trying to be a small American town. So when Janet, because it still stars Brad and Janet, played by two different actors now, because they couldn't get Barry Bostwick or Susan Sarandon, who were Brad and Janet in Rocky Horror Picture Show, back for Shock Treatment, so they recast them with two other actors. But when Janet goes to visit her parents, they're on the set of a show instead of in their house. So it's kind of the reality of this new world is all around us. The music's not bad in it. It's weird just because of the whole. It takes place in a TV studio. It makes everything that happens in this movie a tinge weirder than it needed to be. I think if they could have done it in the American suburb like it was supposed to, it probably would have made the movie a lot better. Richard O'Brien and Patricia Quinn, who played Magenta and Riff Raff in Rocky Horror, they come back to play Cosmo and Nation, who are a pair of psychiatrists who Brad is committed to early in the film. You also have a couple other actors come back from Rocky Horror. Only one actor reprises his role. I don't know what the actor's name is, but he's literally on screen for all of maybe 30 seconds in Rocky Horror Picture Show, and he's a full character in Shock Treatment. So, good for him. He got moved up in the world. Overall, Shock Treatment's not a bad movie. It's weird. If you hold it up to Rocky Horror, it's not as good. It falls so short of Rocky Horror's standard that it's just ridiculous. It doesn't have quite the same cult following, but again, it's a weird movie. Once you get over the added weirdness of it all taking place in a television studio, it's not a bad movie. It can be enjoyable. It can be entertaining. You just have to let it be. So that is my thoughts on Rocky Horror Picture Show and its sequel, Shock Treatment. Again, Rocky Horror, it's one of my top 100 films. I love it. Shock Treatment, it's a solid 6 out of 10. It's not a great movie. It's not awful. It's just right there. Once you can get around that it's not Rocky Horror Picture Show, and it's not going to be as good as Rocky Horror, it can be pretty enjoyable. Alright, so check back next week. Obviously, Wednesday, I start my horror movie talks, and then Thursday, we're going to move on to probably my favorite horror movie of all time, individual horror movie. I can get why people might not classify it as it, but it's my channel, so screw it. Alright, see you next time.